and welcome back to Otaku no Video. As always, thank you very much for joining me. I'm here today with a review of Haibane Renmei, an anime that came out in the early 2000s by the creative team behind Serial Experiments Lain, Technolize, NieA Under 7, lots of other stuff like that. It has a rather interesting origin story, actually. The character designer, Yoshitoshi Abe, said he wanted to make a doujinshi for Comiket, but it's going to be an original doujinshi, not based on an existing anime or manga. So he sat down with some of the character designs and sketches he'd done before and decided he was going to do this doujinshi just completely off the top of his head with no specific, plan, and just write as it came out. And so Yasuyuki Ueda, the executive producer part of that team, and they're both friends, he came over to Abe's place and said, "What are you working on?" and looked at this, and he grabbed the first page of this manga, looked at it, and said, "We need to make an anime out of this." And Ueda said, "Okay," or Abe said, "Okay." And so they made an anime out of it with Abe, Yoshitoshi Abe, as primary creator, really the creator of the concept, which is very unusual in anime to have everything sort of come out of one person's very specific vision, artistic vision. And okay, I've got to explain the basic premise of Haibane Renmei, but Haibane is structured such that you can watch it without having any idea what's going on and have it be revealed to you as the story goes on. So you may not want to hear this if you want to just come into a completely virgin. But this is just the basic setup of the story, and it's what everyone talks about when they talk about Haibane. And I'm not going to get into spoiler territory about any of the later plot points. But Haibane Renmei concerns a girl named Raka who wakes up in this world, this little pocket world, essentially, that seems to be kind of carefully constructed for her and some other people who are living there. And it appears to be sort of this little intermediary world. It's strange, with lots of strange rules that just are there, and nobody ever really explains them. They're just the way things are. For example, Raka and the other girls with her cannot own money, although the other villagers in this village can. Strange, but that's just the way the world works. And so the anime deals with how she's exploring that environment and what that really means. Now, this is actually based on a novel called Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Takashi Murakami, who's a famous Japanese novelist. And if you go and read that novel, you'll actually see a lot of similar parallels, as opposed to dissimilar parallels. Anyway, so you got this little pocket world, and that forms the basic interesting element, or the most interesting element to me about Haibane, which is that it confirms that it's part of a very small percentage of stories within Brent's unified narrative theory, which basically states that the vast majority of stories, narratives, plots, those are not interchangeable, but anyway, are antagonist-based. The protagonists are fighting against some kind of antagonist. It could be a villain, Darth Vader, or the shark in Jaws, or whatever. It can be an organization, the Nazis, the Empire, whatever. And it can be sort of an impersonal force of nature, something that is essentially just out there. And that can be, you can kind of go a couple of different ways with that. You can see a lot of the Indiana Jones movies being about not so much an antagonist, although there are antagonists, but about the traps and the temples and so forth that Indy faces off against. Those are not specific antagonists, they're just sort of nature. Movies about tornadoes and earthquakes and so forth, they're about, that natural disaster is the antagonist, in a sense. Very small number of narratives have no antagonist. This is very unusual for folks to be able to pull off. And those stories are almost always exploratory in nature. Think of My Neighbor Totoro. There's no antagonist, there's no villain, there's no force of nature that the characters are struggling against. There's really no struggle. It's about exploring this environment that the girls are in. Kiki's Delivery Service has some antagonists throughout it, but it is mostly exploring Kiki's new environment. Same thing with Haibane Renmei. There's no villain. There are some antagonistic forces, very, very broadly, very, lightly, but it's almost entirely about exploring this environment, exploring how the characters deal with this environment. This is this anime focuses on how characters deal with being in this sort of pocket world and what they do as a result of being there. And it's not this massively stressful reaction against it. So the interesting thing is that the characters are actually very calm and at peace with where they are, as they should be, as it gets revealed later. No spoilers. I also want to mention the fact that I'm talking about characters. Voice acting here, top notch in both the anime and both the English and the Japanese, which is quite difficult to do. They got a really top notch cast all the way around, no problems there anywhere. So anyway, better talk about the animation art quality. One interesting thing that Abe did here is he complains a lot that artists typically will, for anime, choose colors based on their very carefully color balanced monitors and the colors in front of them and so forth, forgetting that when those colors are then put on an LCD screen or a plasma screen, they're much brighter than they appear to the artists. That's why one of the reasons why anime and cartoons seem so brightly colored. So Abe very deliberately chose a very muted color palette. A lot of earth tones in here, browns, greens, not pastels, but colors that are much more subtle than you'll get in a typical anime, which is very important, and gives Haibane this very distinctive visual style, and a beautiful visual style. Gorgeous backgrounds, wonderful artwork in Haibane. So this is one of the interesting things about Haibane. Is it looks different, it's written different. It's this exploratory experience. And by the end, no spoilers here, this is an anime about sin and redemption. It's about characters and people's pasts, what they've done and how they deal with the things that they've done. And what that means to people, and what it doesn't mean to people in a lot of ways. So Haibane Renmei is really a work of art. It deals with very human issues without resorting to action or contrived romances or anything like that to really keep the story moving. Instead, it creates this intriguing, beautiful world, lets us explore it and experience it, and shows us how other characters react to that, and does it in a way that, for me, was not just fascinating, but also just compelling. And that, I count to be one of the anime that not just pulled me in, but really made me think about a lot of things. And again, in a way that's very approachable and very easy to watch, which is just absolutely remarkable. I will say that the ending is somewhat difficult to watch because things get intense. And it gets a little bit esoteric, philosophically, if you will, but top notch. So those are my thoughts on Haibane Renmei. If you've seen it or haven't and want to talk about it, stop by the forum at otakunovideo.net/forum, where we talk about this and lots of other interesting anime and manga. Stop by the blog at otakunovideo.net, and you can contact me directly, Brent at otakunovideo.net, or tweet me on Twitter at otakunovideo. So those are my thoughts on Haibane Renmei, and until next time, may you find lots of other interesting, cool, amazing anime to watch.